Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel.
Curt Coburn of Sheboygan is a Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor. The primary is August 14th, the general election November 6th. Curt, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Well, thanks for having me.
Give us the short version of your speech at the convention. Why do you want to be Lieutenant Governor?
Yeah, I want to be Lieutenant Governor.
Okay.
The short version, of course. Yeah, I am born and raised in Sheboygan, as you said, and I see the promise of our state. You know, the state has so much potential, but we're not making the right choices. And I'm running for Lieutenant Governor because I think we have the opportunity to build strong communities again across our state, north, south, east, and west, where every generation can live, work, and thrive. But that means we need to invest. We need to invest in education. We need to build a culture of entrepreneurship. We need to once again protect our environment. So that's why I'm running for Lieutenant Governor.
Invest in entrepreneurship. What new steps are needed?
Yeah, you know, first of all, in order to build a culture of entrepreneurship in our state, it starts with education. I'm a proud product of public education from kindergarten through graduate school, and it made my story possible. I have a background in business and nonprofits and in education, and you know, my wife and I started a small technology company. I worked for a very large company, and it was that investment in public education that made it possible for me to have the skills and the experiences to go jump off and start something new. But it takes that whole mix, and we have to start by investing in education, and then we can move on to how we build a culture of entrepreneurship in our state.
Having watched a few lieutenant governors, I know they can do only what the governor wants them to do or is comfortable.
Yeah.
But lieutenant governors can ask to be the liaison or kind of in charge of certain programs.
That's right.
What ask would you make of the next Democratic governor?
Yeah, I think what I will ask for of the next Democratic governor is to be the chief advocate for education in our state. You know, if you look at education, we have the Department of Public Instruction that owns K through 12, but we don't have someone that is championing education from K through the University of Wisconsin system. And so I will ask to be that champion of education, going out and talking to communities, understanding what is it that they need to enable seamless lifelong learning, to attract and retain the best educators, no matter what kind of institution. So that's the first part of my portfolio. The second part is really around economic development and building this culture of entrepreneurship. I believe we can build the next generation of small family businesses across the state in 72 counties, but someone has to facilitate that conversation. Someone has to bring people together in those communities to start building that culture of entrepreneurship, to put the programs in place to enable people to jump off and start their own business or organization. So those two areas would be my areas
Would you
of
be
focus.
duplicating the duties of the superintendent of public instruction and the president of the UW system?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, I'd see them as allies in this conversation. So as you look at how fast the world is changing and how the role of education and lifelong learning is to keep up with all the change, we need someone who's looking at the whole picture, right? Who's looking at how do these things connect to one another? And then how do we create partnerships between those institutions to enable individuals, citizens, to be able to seamlessly go get education throughout their life. You know, as you look at high-tech manufacturing today, right? One day you're using a specific kind of computer, and then a year later you're using a whole different technology, and that requires people to check in and check out of education. And sometimes that's available at the high school level, sometimes at a technical college, sometimes it's at a UW. So how do we make it really citizen-centric? Someone needs to be an advocate for that.
If a Democrat is elected governor and you're the lieutenant governor, you'd be a part of some of these budget deliberations.
Yeah.
So when the governor looked at you and said, the current state budget includes a dramatic increase for K-12.
Yeah.
Do we need another similar huge increase? What's your answer?
In K-12 in particular?
Yes.
We absolutely do. So what we've seen happen across education in our state is a cut of almost $1.5 billion over the last 8 years. And most of that is in K through 12 education. And so what I'm advocating for in this campaign, and will advocate as Lieutenant Governor, is to make investing in education our #1 priority once again. And that means returning almost $1 billion back to K through 12 schools, almost $100 million back to technical colleges, and about $500 million back to the UW system.
So the next governor says, Curt, I hear you. I'd like to do that. How do I pay for it? How do you
Yeah.
answer?
So there's a couple of ways in which we're going to be able to pay for it. One is we need to look at what we spend on prisons in our state. So we're imprisoning a lot of people that shouldn't be in prison today. And the math on that ranges anywhere between $500 million and $1.2 billion. And so we've got people in prison that really shouldn't be in prison today. The second part of the equation is looking at the Wisconsin Manufacturing and Tax Credit. We need to understand what the impact has been and how we start to phase out the Wisconsin Manufacturing and Tax Credit where it makes sense to reinvest in education and build this culture of entrepreneurship.
Who should get out of prison who is there now?
So we have a lot of people who have been pled into prison sentences for minor offenses. Marijuana is a perfect example. Because of the backlog in our court system, people have been forced to plead and then they end up in prison, right? And these are somewhat minor offenses, the possession of, the use of some of these substances. And so we need to make sure, we need to, one, legalize marijuana in our state. I'm an advocate for both medicinal and recreational use of marijuana. We need to be smart about it. We need to, tax and also have the right regulation around it. But then we can let those folks out of prison as well as not put them in the prison in the first place.
The next governor says what we need is a next step on health care. Your advice is what?
Yeah, so in healthcare in particular, I believe everyone should have access and have healthcare in our society. And
Universal
that's just
healthcare.
That's right. And so one of the proposals I've developed in particular, and a step in that direction, as part of making it easier for individuals to leave their job to go start an organization or start a small business, is to have a 4-year window of time where if you leave your job, you have access to Badger Care for that period of time. So healthcare is taken off of the table as an issue. So you can go start your own venture. And any employee of that organization or business would also receive Badger Care. Let's remove that as an issue, and that's a step in the direction of getting more people access to health care in our state. And then we also need to accept the Medicaid money that we turned away, that the Walker administration has turned away, of course, and multiple other steps in that direction.
Paying for highways. Your recommendations? Your advice to the next governor?
Yeah, my advice on highways is everything needs to be on the table. We need a sustainable funding model for our highways and other infrastructure in the state. We don't have it today, and everyone's feeling it. When I go out and talk to voters all over the state, one of the top 3 issues they talk about is what the condition of the roads are. And these are, all of us are used to having good infrastructure in our state, and that's changed over the last 8 years. And we've been largely putting that work on a credit card. And we need to stop doing that by building a sustainable funding model, especially as I talk to small businesses and medium-sized businesses in our state that have been doing that work. They're talking about they don't have predictability from year to year on budgeting, so they can't tell their staff if they're going to have jobs next year because of the lack of funding for our roads and the impact that it has in communities.
Should the next budget include an increase in the gas tax?
I think everything should be on the table. And what I would call for as Lieutenant Governor actually is a study for where the world is going when it comes to transportation and infrastructure. We know that the gas tax is based on fuel, right? But as we move to a world where we have electric cars or higher gas mileage on vehicles, we need to look at everything as an option. So I wouldn't say there's one answer. We need to look at the whole table and what's the plan over the next decade to fund our infrastructure.
The T word, tolling, your position?
Again, I think everything should be on the table. We should look at reindexing the gas tax, tolling is on the table, everything should be on the table. You know what, I come from the business world, right? And so when we're looking at a problem, we say, what has to be true for something to happen? And so you look at every option on the table. There may be options where you're like, only when we're desperate are we going to pull that lever, right? And so that's what the approach I would bring to this process around funding roads.
All 8 Democratic candidates for governor oppose the Foxconn, say it's a bad deal.
Yeah.
But you go from Matt Flynn saying, I would go to court to stop it,
right,
to now Tony Evers last week saying, it's here, we need to renegotiate it.
Yeah.
You've got business experience.
Yep.
The state has contracts with Foxconn.
Yep.
Next steps on Foxconn?
Well,
first of all, is it a bad deal?
It is a bad deal. The Foxconn deal is a bad deal for Wisconsin taxpayers. And I would argue we're having the wrong conversation. We should be talking about how do we build economies in all 72 counties, not just a handful of counties, and charging every Wisconsin household $1,800 a household for that company. That's what makes it a bad deal. There's no we don't know that there's a broad impact across 72 counties, and we as taxpayers are paying for it. Look, again, I come from the business world. Our company has never asked a community to ask for a subsidy of $1,800 to do business in that community. It's the wrong approach to economic development for our state. When I'm lieutenant governor, what I'll bring to the conversation is a background in experience working with companies much larger than Foxconn, but also with a vision and a plan to make economic development happen in 72 counties across our state. You know, Foxconn in southeast Wisconsin may be good for a couple of those communities, but what do I tell the people in Florence County? Right? What do I tell the people in Manitowoc County? Right? We need an economic development strategy for the entire state, not just a couple counties.
Okay, let's play this out. The next governor says, okay, I'm kind of busy developing my next budget. I want you to hold the initial rounds of conversation with Foxconn. What are you going to ask them?
Yeah, absolutely. So this would not be the first time I'd be in that conversation. I've negotiated with much larger companies than Foxconn. As soon as we would sit down with the right leadership, it's important to have the right people in the room. And this includes the CEO of the company, and I would insist that he's in the room, right? The first thing we would do is say, hey, from Wisconsin's perspective and this administration's perspective, this is not a good deal. Right? A 25-year return on an investment isn't acceptable in almost any world that I've ever been in before. But there are two issues here. There are environmental issues, and then there are economic issues. And we're going to be very clear on what the environmental issues are and what the economic issues are. And what we're going to say is, we need to solve these, and we're open to how we solve them. We're open to how we solve the environmental issues. That may mean you investing in technologies to make sure you don't have to take as much water out of Lake Michigan. And maybe we help in some way through the infrastructure to make that new technology possible. That's the first part of the conversation. And secondly, the economic conversation. What I come in with a bias is, what is the strategy and the plan to develop the supplier network for Foxconn? What we see is a conversation about the supplier network, but there's no strategy to actually make it happen. And so what we'll do in those conversations is we'll start the process of developing that strategy for suppliers and make sure that a bunch of those suppliers are Wisconsin-based with Wisconsin employees.
I've covered governors who don't have much use for their lieutenant governors. How would you stay on the good side of your governor?
Yeah, my experience, in the private sector or even in education where I've worked before, you don't get to ask for who your boss is. And that's the same situation here. And so what you can control is how you work with that person and how you engage with them. So as soon as I got into this race, and even before I got into this race, I started building relationships with all the gubernatorial candidates and meet with them on a pretty regular basis, offer coffee or other things, right? And I have to tell you, I've been really I have had a positive experience with every candidate that I've met with, and we've talked about specifics. What is my responsibility and role in this campaign, and what is my responsibility and role as lieutenant governor? And so we won't come in, blind once we're elected.
Your opponent in the primaries has roots in Milwaukee. What do you think is the greatest need of Milwaukee?
Yeah, Milwaukee to me is a huge opportunity. We have, as Milwaukee goes, so goes the state of Wisconsin. Milwaukee needs to be successful. And I spent a lot of time in Milwaukee over the last couple of years, better understanding the community, because I'm from Sheboygan, not too far up the road. And one of the things I've realized is there's a real opportunity to listen to Milwaukee, to listen to the people that live in Milwaukee. Because the problem I've seen is when I talk to residents in Milwaukee, in any neighborhood, they have ideas on how to change what's been happening in Milwaukee, but they're not being listened to. And one of my jobs as lieutenant governor, when I talk about building a new economy and a culture of entrepreneurship, how do we do that in the places that need it the most? And I tell you, people have ideas. I mean, I did doors in Milwaukee, it was 3 weeks ago, and over I heard, one, we need our kids to be busy after school. And they said, if we had some sort of organized program in addition to the Boys and Girls Club, we could keep our kids busy. Well, if you talk about an incubator for new businesses and organizations, right? What an opportunity to bring kids in after school and get skills and create something and maybe even launch a business out of it, launch a nonprofit out of it. So the ideas live in the community. We just need to start listening to the community and take those ideas and elevate them. And I'll just give you one example. I was meeting with a minister the other day, and he said they're working on taking houses that have been foreclosed upon. They're buying them back from the city for $1, and then they're building a supplier network from within the community of people that are renovating those homes, and then they're selling them to residents of the community. And they go through some classes to understand home ownership, which I wish I had when I bought my first home, right? And it was a great program. And I asked him, I said, what's holding you back from really scaling this? And he said, Curt, quite frankly, if we had $1 million, because they had invested about $300,000 already, if we had $1 million, we'd be all systems go. And I said, that's an amazing example of what I can do as lieutenant governor is we build this culture of entrepreneurship and bring capital together, find these opportunities, and invest in them. The work is happening. We just need to enable it.
Then last question. Why are you more qualified than your Democratic opponent in the primary and the incumbent Lieutenant Governor Clayfish?
Yeah, I think what you'll find with my candidacy is I have a broad set of life experiences and proven results. Anything I do, whether it be in education or nonprofits or business, I've been able to achieve whatever we've set out to do. And so for this office in particular, I have plans for day one. And you can go to our website, curtforwisconsin.com, and you'll see in education and entrepreneurship, we have very specific plans on what will happen on day one. And I'm known for getting those things done. I'm known for making plans come to reality. So that's what I bring to this office. My opponent in this race, had the pleasure of serving the residents of his district for 2 terms, but over that period of time, never passed any significant legislation or brought a dollar home to his district. So I think that's the choice that people have in this race.
Okay, thank you. Curt Coburn of Sheboygan is the Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor. The primary is August 14th. The general election is November 6th. Curt, thank you for talking to WisconsinEye.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel.